My name is Sierra Marin. I'm 32 years old. 4 language badges. Cute. You gonna order us lunch in Italian next? That's my Uncle Tom. Loud enough for everyone at the retirement dinner to hear. I don't say a word. I don't even blink. We're standing beneath gold and burgundy drapes at the Century Club in D.C. The air smells like oak polish and overcooked roast beef. Around us, crystal glasses chime with light clinks of whiskey and forced nostalgia. 100 people clapping for a man who once told me to stop dreaming. Tom claps too, one hand in his pocket, one hand slow and smug. He's my mother's younger brother. Navy vet. 4 years in. Never deployed. But he wears that flag pin like it's embedded in his chest. His voice slices through the noise. She works with Google or something. Some startup. She translates code or coffee shop menus or, I don't know. She's always overseas. He shrugs, turning to the others. Cute little gig. I turn away slowly. Across the banquet floor, past waiters and retirees and forced laughter, a man in a charcoal suit puts down his glass. His eyes meet mine. His nod is imperceptible, but it's there. And then the microphone goes dead. I hear it in the silence first, that clean snap of tension in the room. The MC taps the mic. Sorry, folks. Little technical thing. People murmur, stretch in their chairs. Some lean toward the open bar. But not me. I'm still facing the man in the charcoal suit. He's still watching me, and Uncle Tom, bless him, keeps going. Well, not everyone's cut out for real service. She tried ROTC for like a second, right, kid? He chuckles like it's some sweet anecdote. Didn't stick. I close my fingers around the edge of my plate. Salmon, wilted asparagus, plain rice. Not the moment to throw anything. Anyway, he continues. You know what they say. Those who can't fight translate. The people around him laugh. Not cruelly, but the way people laugh when they're trying not to pick sides. The way people laugh when they're sure you won't respond. I don't. I fold my napkin slowly into a square. My cousin Diane gives me a little pat on the shoulder the way people do when they think you're too delicate to understand a joke was at your expense. She whispers, ignore him. He's had scotch. And I nod because what else do you do? But across the room, the man in the charcoal suit is still standing, and I know exactly who he is. I stand too, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. A ripple moves, not through my family, but through their table. The quietest one in the room, the man who hasn't said a word all evening, steps toward the podium. Someone clears his throat. Someone else mutters, "Is that?" The air shifts. Tom's voice fades like a bad signal, and I know what's coming before he even opens his mouth. The director doesn't look at Tom. He looks at me and nods once. Just once. I don't need to hear it. I already know. But when he speaks, every fork in the room stops mid-air. She's not a guest, he says. She's our asset. It takes a second. Maybe 2. Uncle Tom lowers his glass. Slowly. His mouth stays open, but nothing comes out. The director of the Central Intelligence Agency turns toward the mic. He doesn't say anything more. He doesn't have to. The MC blinks, checks the cards in his hand, and stammers, Thank you, sir. Let's continue the evening. Polite applause rises. Mechanical. Confused, but not from Tom. He hasn't moved. The silence behind his eyes is louder than the clapping. I sit. Across the table, Diane's hand is still on my shoulder, frozen. Like she suddenly realized the ground beneath us was marble, not linoleum. She leans in, voice low. What? Was that I lift my glass of water, take a sip, let the silence stretch between us. The director doesn't come over. He doesn't need to. His words are still echoing. She's our asset. No one at our table speaks for the next 5 minutes. I count every one of them in my head. The waiters come back, pour wine. Clear plates, offer desserts. Someone, probably Aunt May, asks if anyone wants coffee. No one answers, and I breathe, slow, even. Like I'm back in the safe house in Marrakesh waiting for a burner to ring. This is the part they never see. Not the desert ops or the dead drops or the bruises that don't show up for days. It's this, sitting still, knowing exactly who you are. while the people who dismissed you try to recalculate their entire understanding of your worth. Uncle Tom finally moves. He looks at me. His face is tight. Then he lowers his eyes, murmurs something about the restroom, and walks off. No swagger, no jokes, just a man who saw something he wasn't supposed to. Diane starts to say something again. I shake my head once. Not now, not yet. Let them sit in it. Let them wonder, because I'm not done. Not by a long shot. I was always the quiet one. In a family that measured success in volume and visibility, I learned early how to disappear. My cousins ran track, did debate, made honor roll. They brought home trophies and clippings. I brought home library receipts and cassette tapes in different languages. My mother, Claire, was a pediatric nurse who could talk through any silence. My father left when I was 8. After that, Uncle Tom became the male presence, loud, commanding, always telling stories that ended with someone saluting him or buying him a drink. I didn't talk much, not because I couldn't, but because I learned that in our house, silence was safer than contradiction. By the time I was 12, I was already fluent in French and conversational in Farsi. I used to listen to foreign broadcasts on shortwave tucked under the covers. While the others were watching reruns of Friends, I was whispering back at radio static from Tehran, Bogota, Nairobi. My mom thought it was a phase. Uncle Tom thought it was weird. She's just shy, she'd say at family cookouts, as if that explained everything. Tom would ruffle my hair and say, she'll grow out of it. Maybe join the Peace Corps. But I didn't grow out of it, I grew into it. I joined a local college, early got dual degrees in linguistics and Middle Eastern studies, and then disappeared again, this time to graduate school under a research fellowship I didn't tell anyone about. Even then, I knew the less they knew, the safer I was. They wouldn't have understood the classified offers, the discreet lunches, the 3-hour psychological interviews. They didn't know what it meant when a State Department recruiter handed me a plain white envelope with a date and time. When I left for my first overseas assignment, I told them it was a language immersion program in Jordan. They sent emojis and said, sounds fun. They never asked again. When I came home 6 years later, I had 4 interpreter badges and burn scars no one asked about. They threw a backyard party and called it a world traveler reunion. Tom made jokes about my gap year on steroids. My mother introduced me to her coworkers as Sierra the translator. She's got, what, 4 languages now, smart girl. I didn't correct them. Because what would I say? That the last place I translated was a black site on the edge of Kandahar. That I once listened to a smuggled audio file for 11 straight hours to find one name that stopped a convoy before it hit a school bus. No. I smiled. I held my paper plate of potato salad and drank from plastic cups. And when they asked how it felt to just do languages, I said, it's good. They didn't know how my voice changed in a Russian dialect to buy us time at a checkpoint. They didn't know I had once impersonated a Syrian defense attaché's niece to retrieve a stolen drive. They didn't know about Prague or Karachi, or that summer in Djibouti when I had a target in my scope and let him go because I knew what would happen if I didn't. And they wouldn't have cared. To them, service meant combat boots and medals, blood and noise, men who marched and women who waited. Not me. Not the quiet girl who disappeared and came back without stories they could understand. Tom was the worst of them, but not the only one. He made it easier for the rest to laugh. To say things like, oh, Sierra, yeah, she does techie stuff for the government. Or, code breaking or something. CIA may be just kidding. Unless I was always the punchline they didn't realize had teeth. And I let them do it. Because power doesn't always need to explain itself. But tonight, something slipped. When that microphone went dead and the director stood up, the line cracked. And the people who used to talk over me suddenly realized they'd never really seen me at all. Not even my mother. She sat 2 seats from me that night, sipping her wine with her hair perfectly curled. And when the director said those 3 words, she's our asset, I saw her fingers tighten around the stem of her glass. That's when I knew the truth landed. Not just for Tom, but for all of them. I wasn't the one who changed. They just finally noticed I had never been who they thought I was. It started with the wedding. My cousin Aaron Tom's daughter was getting married in Asheville. A vineyard strings of warm lights that curated rustic chic look people pinned to their dream boards. Everyone was invited. Even me. Though I noticed my name was left off the planning email chain. Mom called a week before and said, "You're still coming, right? You haven't RSVP'd. I wasn't sent the RSVP link." Oh, I thought maybe you were traveling. Or underground, huh? She always added those little jokes lately, like she didn't believe half of what she said herself, like she was testing me for reactions she knew I'd never give. I told her I'd come, bought my own ticket, showed up in a long navy dress with flat shoes because I had no interest in outdressing anyone. But the moment I walked into that white tent, I knew something was off. No seat at the family table, no name card, no +1 even though I'd noted it. Tom spotted me near the bar and let out this theatrical groan. "Look what the desert dragged in." A few of the other uncles laughed. My mom didn't look up from her wine. He came closer, held up my badge from the night before. "You still carrying this thing around?" He turned it in his fingers like it was a souvenir keychain. It wasn't the real one. That stayed locked. This one was symbolic, a civilian-friendly version for non-classified events. He smirked. 4 interpreter badges. 4. What's next? A decoder ring. I took it back from him without a word. But something in me cracked that night. Because it didn't stop there. At the reception, Erin thanked everyone, her aunts, her parents, even Diane, for helping pick the playlist. When she came to me, her voice hesitated. And Sierra. For making time, I guess. From whatever global thing she's doing. A few chuckles. And then a toast from Tom. Here's to Erin, who stayed close, who didn't run off to translate the world. I smiled, but inside I felt a shift I couldn't reverse. A week later, I found out they had excluded me from the family group chat. The one where they shared house projects, baby pictures, health updates. It had been going for months. Mom didn't even try to explain. "We didn't think you'd have time," she said, folding laundry on her couch like we were talking about weather. "You didn't ask." She looked at me, shrugged. "Honestly, Sierra, half the time we don't even know what country you're in, as if that was justification, as if my distance gave them permission to erase me." Then came Christmas. I sent gifts, discreet, thoughtful, personalized. Scarves from Istanbul, a hand-bound book from Florence, a box of rare teas for Mom. No one responded. I flew in on Christmas Eve, and there was no place for me at the table. Literally. They had miscounted the chairs. "Oh, shoot," Erin said, hand to her mouth. "We didn't know you were actually coming." My seat was at the corner by the patio door. Fold-out chair, no cushion. And still, I sat. Still, I smiled. Still, I listened to Tom talk about the VA clinic like he'd founded it even though he was never deployed. He complained about soft service and the desk jockeys who never see combat. His eyes landed on me when he said it. My mother said nothing. I felt it then, that slow realization, like a knife sliding inward. They weren't just teasing me. They had decided I didn't count. A month later, it hit its final form. Tom gave a podcast interview. Some low-budget veteran platform. The kind with an eagle logo and glitchy audio. He spoke for 45 minutes about honor grit and real warriors. Then came the line. "You know I've got a niece who's in the intelligence space or whatever. Translates things. She wears the uniform sometimes, but I mean, come on. 4 language badges. That's Girl Scout stuff. No offense. They posted the clip. It got shared. And one of the junior analysts at Langley forwarded it to me with a subject line that just said, "Wow." I didn't respond. Not because it didn't hurt, but because it did. Deeply. What they never understood, what they chose not to understand, was that silence isn't weakness. Silence is survival. I've sat across from men who ordered bombings. I've translated between diplomats who could freeze borders with a handshake. I've intercepted whispers that changed national policies. But I never raised my voice at my uncle. I never screamed at my mother. I just watched and took note. Because once a language is learned, it cannot be unlearned. And theirs was clear. I didn't belong. The hardest part wasn't being ignored. It was realizing they enjoyed it. It made them feel unified, bonded, stronger. Their mockery wasn't careless. It was deliberate. Because when they couldn't understand me, they made me small. Because if I was something more, something powerful, it would make their own lives smaller. So they laughed. They cut my seat. They made me invisible. And I let them. Until that night in D.C. Until the man they couldn't ignore stood up for the one person they never imagined mattered. I didn't cry after the podcast. I didn't even listen to it again. I just closed the window and stared at my desk for a long time, my fingers still on the mouse, still curled like I was holding something. That day, the office was silent. The hallway outside my unit always smelled faintly like printer toner and dust, even though everything was paperless now. I could hear distant clicks from the analysts across the hall. A few muffled voices, phones ringing and stopping mid-ring, normalcy wrapped in tension. And me, I just sat there, badge clipped to my shirt, hair pinned back, blank screen in front of me. The silence around me was familiar. The silence in me was heavier because I'd been trained for all kinds of conflict linguistic chaos, coded threats, sudden disinformation drops. I could catch the rhythm of panic in a foreign tongue and match it with calm precision. But this wasn't that. This was a slow, creeping doubt that started in my ribs and curled around my throat. What if they were right? What if everything I'd done, every brief, every sting, every sleepless night in embassies or safe houses or third world motels was just invisible because it wasn't supposed to matter, because I was never loud, because I never carried a weapon, because I never wore the kind of uniform they could clap for? What if the badges didn't mean anything to anyone but me? I went home early that day, turned off my phone, left my work bag in the kitchen, and walked barefoot into the bedroom like the floor might give way. The apartment was cold. Or maybe I was. I didn't turn on the lights. I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling fan until the blades blurred. My phone buzzed once, then again. Probably my team lead asking for a reply to the operations request, or a follow-up from someone who'd heard the clip. I didn't check. I pulled the blanket tighter around me, turned my face to the wall, let the silence stretch. By morning, it hadn't passed. I woke up hollow, like something important had been scraped out. I moved slowly, made toast I didn't eat, brewed coffee I didn't drink. Every movement felt like pantomime, like I was playing the role of someone competent, present, real. But my body didn't believe it. I couldn't stop replaying the small moments, the folded chair at Christmas, the shrug from my mother, the glance from Diane when Tom made his jokes, little cuts that had never healed, just scabbed over. And now every one of them was open. I wanted to vanish, not from the world, just from them, from the version of myself they had carved in their heads, from the little box they shoved me into every holiday and family dinner. She does translator stuff. She's always flying somewhere. She's too smart for her own good. That day, I skipped the debrief meeting, sent an excuse, said I had a migraine. Nobody questioned it. They knew I worked too hard. They knew I never asked for time. The space felt strange, like I had stepped out of my own life and was floating somewhere next to it unseen. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk, took out the old case. Inside were all 4 badges side by side. Interpreter Tier 1, Level 4, MENA clearance, Language Tag Alpha, Joint Mission Verified, metal ribbon etched code numbers, cold in my palm. I held them for a long time. Not to admire, to ask them a question. Do you matter if no one believes you do? That night, I dreamed I was back in the compound outside Seuss. Desert wind, cracked walls, that blue-painted door we watched for 10 days straight, waiting for a courier who never came. In the dream, I'm alone. The others are gone. I'm holding my headset. But it's dead, no signal. And I can hear Tom's voice, echoing somewhere far off. You gonna order us lunch in Italian next? I wake up sweating, my breath short. I sit on the floor. It's still dark, and for the first time in years, I think about quitting. Just walking away, leaving the work, the field, the briefings. Let them find someone else to sit in windowless rooms and pull truths from scattered words. Let someone else carry the quiet weight of knowing you saved lives you'll never be allowed to name. Let someone else disappear. Because I'm tired. Because maybe they were right. Maybe I was never built for this. At noon the next day, I got a package. No sender. Just a plain envelope with my initials in black ink. Inside was a handwritten note. Sometimes silence is the strongest accent. No name, Just that one line. And a date. Just 3 days from now. The handwriting was familiar. Sharp, angular, left-handed. The director. I had seen him write like that once before on a napkin outlining extraction timing during a summit in Copenhagen. He never wastes words. And he never sends notes unless something is already in motion. I stared at the envelope, at the date, and I realized this wasn't over. Not even close. Something was coming, and whatever it was, I was still part of it, still chosen, still known, even if they couldn't see it, even if my own family refused to see anything beyond the version of me they'd made up to make themselves feel bigger. That night, I stood in front of the mirror, put on the jacket, the real one, not the civilian coat, not the cute blazer from weddings and banquets, the one with the seal sewn in the lining, the one I hadn't worn since the Istanbul drop. I stood there for a long time, watching myself, and slowly my shoulders stopped sagging. My breath deepened. The hollow quiet inside me began to shift, no longer absence, but readiness. Because when someone tries to erase you long enough one day, you wake up and remember you never needed to be visible to have value. You just needed to stop asking them for proof. The day came, the one the director marked on the note. I didn't go into Langley, didn't get a summons, no coded text, no op brief, just that handwritten message. And still I knew better than to ignore it. So I dressed the way I always do for uncertain days, black trousers, layered gray blouse. Civilian calm with enough edge to slip unnoticed into any room. I wore a pin on my lapel. Not a flag, not a symbol. Just one small coiled brass spiral, something my handler gave me years ago in Aleppo. He'd called it a language knot. It's from pre-Islamic calligraphy, he said, handing it to me with cracked fingers and eyes that never stopped scanning. Meaning folds in meaning. Power inside silence. I didn't know why I pinned it on that day. Only that I needed to feel the weight of something old, something earned. At 3:17 p.m., the call came. Unmarked number, one ring, then silence. I slipped on my coat, left my apartment without checking my messages, took the elevator like I was made of glass. Outside, the wind had picked up. Leaves scraped across the sidewalk. Everything felt colder than it should have for April. The SUV arrived just as I turned the corner. Tinted windows, DC plates, not the kind they use for errands or escorts. The passenger side door clicked open. I didn't hesitate. Inside, the director was waiting. No small talk, just a slight incline of his head the way some men remove their hats in churches. He handed me a sealed folder, unstamped, red thread at the edges. Nothing for the agency record, he said. I nodded. He looked out the window as we pulled away. I hear your uncle's made quite a name for himself on the speaking circuit. I didn't reply, because what do you say to that? That I listened to the podcast twice now, that I memorized the cadence of every insult, that I had the entire thing translated into Pashto just for the hell of it, just to know how the mockery would sound in a war zone. No. Instead, I said, it's not about him, and I meant it. But I also didn't. Because I knew this assignment, this ride, wasn't just about global security or field extraction. It was about reclaiming something I hadn't even realized they'd taken from me. We drove for 40 minutes, mostly in silence. At one point he asked, "How are you sleeping?" I stared ahead, counted the lights, watched them stutter past the windows like weak stars. "Worse than usual," I said. He nodded. That kind of nod that contains permission. To hurt. To continue anyway. We arrived at an embassy annex, one of those buildings with a fake dentistry plaque and no doorbell. Inside was a staircase with low lighting and concrete walls that hadn't been painted in decades. I was led down the hall past 2 security layers into a small room with 1 desk, 1 chair, and 2 mugs of untouched tea. There across from me sat a woman, hair in a low bun, gray blazer, no expression, but her eyes. Those were the eyes of someone who'd buried entire teams and never cried in front of the report. She didn't introduce herself, just opened the folder. On the first page, a name I hadn't heard in 5 years. On the second, an address. On the third, a timestamp and 2 words translation required. I read through the brief. It wasn't long, but it was dense. Encrypted code layers nested within a Persian dialect that hadn't been used officially since 1991. Someone had buried something in the language itself, not in the content, in the form. My specialty. The thing Tom thought meant ordering lunch in Italian. I worked for 3 hours in that room, alone, reconstructing the code like a surgeon sewing skin over muscle. By the end of it, I was sweating, hands trembling, eyes dry. When I pushed the final page across the table, the woman in the gray blazer just stared at it. Then, almost imperceptibly, she smiled. "Only 3 people on the planet could have done this," she said. Then she stood, left me in the room alone. On the drive back, the director didn't say much, but just before I stepped out of the car, he said, "We all forget who we are sometimes, Sierra. That's why we remind each other." Back in my apartment, I placed the language not pin in the center of my desk. Next to it, I laid out my badges, one by one. Not because I needed to prove anything, not to them, not even to me, but because I wanted to see the shape of my life, the real shape, not the absence, not the erasure, not the chair they never saved at the table, the life I had chosen, the weight I had carried, the languages I had listened to until I could hear truth through accent, fear behind syllable intent under hesitation. That night, I stood by the window and stared out at the dark skyline. I thought of my mother, how she used to sing to herself while folding towels, how she never asked about the scars. I thought of Tom, how he still probably believed I was the soft one, the harmless one. Let him, let them all, because I had nothing left to explain, and I wasn't finished. Power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't shout in microphones or stand on stages. Not real power. The kind I knew had carried in silence for years spoke only in presence, in precision, in pauses between words where men assumed nothing existed, but something did, and I was done pretending I didn't feel it. The morning after the embassy debrief, I woke before dawn. No alarms, no internal panic. Just the kind of clarity that doesn't come often like a radio finally tuned. I brewed a single cup of coffee, didn't check the news, didn't open the app where my family's group texts still chirped about things like wedding RSVPs and potluck rosters. Let them talk. Let them joke about my travels or how Sierra probably speaks Klingon by now. I had other things to prepare. I took out the old black case from the bottom drawer, the one with the scuff near the hinge. I hadn't touched it in almost a year. Inside, 4 interpreter badges. Not plastic, not ornamental. Real, stamped, numbered. Each one earned under a different context, a different shade of risk. Pashto in Kabul, Farsi in Isfahan, Mandarin in Kunming, and the last Arabic granted during an op so quiet they made me sign 4 NDAs and destroy my own notes. I laid them out on the table in order. Each one had weight, and behind each was a version of me the world had never met. That was about to change. I sent 2 messages that morning, one to someone in logistics I hadn't spoken to since Djibouti, the other to an analyst in crypto-linguistics who still owed me a favor after I saved his project from imploding mid-briefing in Geneva. I didn't say much, didn't need to. The requests were clear, and I knew they'd be honored, because there's something about respect earned in the quiet margins, it lasts longer than noise. Then I opened my laptop, typed in a name, Thomas Fielding, my uncle, my humiliation. His public persona had swelled since the podcast. Now he had a new video series, speaking tours, motivational webinars that pretended to uplift vets but mostly belittled anyone who didn't fit his idea of sacrifice. There he was on screen smiling that politician's smile, blazer flag pin loud opinions. And there I was buried in his 3rd episode. Not by name, of course, but the story was mine. He called it The Interpreter Who Cried in a Briefing, said she froze up over a translation and almost cost lives, laughed as he told it, said he'd warned her family not to coddle her. Didn't matter how many little pins she had, he grinned. She just didn't belong. I watched it in full, then again, then a 3rd time without the sound, just his eyes, his body language, the smirk when he hit the punchline. He believed every word, and the world believed him. But here's what he didn't know. The incident he described where I supposedly froze, I hadn't frozen. I had refused. There was a phrase buried in a wiretap coded stylized impossible to parse without full cultural context. They wanted to act on it immediately. I said no. I said wait. I said this word has 4 meanings in dialect. You're about to target a wedding. They didn't believe me until I proved it, and saved 46 people in a northern province, including 2 of our own embedded assets. But that part never made it into Tom's story. Too complex, too quiet, too inconvenient. So now I was rewriting it, my way. I called Mia. We hadn't spoken in 6 months. Not out of anger, just the slow erosion that happens when fieldwork makes you a stranger to your own life. She picked up on the second ring. Sierra. Still remember how to run sound for a room of 200 a beat of silence. Then, where? The event was already public. Veterans Honor Conference. Downtown D.C. keynote, Thomas Fielding. His face was on the flyer mid-salute. Behind him, a blurred silhouette of a woman at a podium anonymous. Supposed to be symbolic. They didn't know the irony, because I was the woman they'd erased. Mia secured me a slot, not as a speaker, not at first, but as a special language operations observer with background clearance. Her badge got me in the room, but my name would change the story. I spent the next 2 nights preparing not a speech, not a confrontation, just a presence. I pulled my field credentials, my case files, my clearance cards, everything I had once hidden in the shadows of diplomacy and deniability. I wasn't stepping on stage to shout. I was stepping up to stand in full view, so when they looked at me, they'd see. On the day of the conference, I arrived early. Black blazer, interpreter pins aligned in a neat vertical row. No makeup, just the truth on my face. People murmured as I walked past. Some nodded at the badges, not recognizing what they meant. Others paused, and one woman seated near the back whispered, "Is that?" then looked away before finishing. It had begun. Tom was already backstage, pacing, rehearsing lines. He didn't see me, not yet, but he would. And this time, he wouldn't be the one holding the mic when the story changed. They introduced him like royalty. Decorated Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel, 30 years of service, now a leading voice for veteran transition. The audience clapped, stood, whistled. I stayed seated, not out of protest, out of patience. He walked on stage like he belonged there. Back straight, chin high. The same gleam in his eye I remembered from family Christmases when he'd drop comments like, "We all serve in our own little way, huh, Sierra?" He wore his medals like armor. A lapel mic buzzed quietly as he opened his mouth. "Thank you," he began. "It's an honor to be here. Really. I want to speak today about courage. But not the kind you think." He smiled, paused for effect. "The kind I mean," he said, "shows up where you least expect it. And sometimes," he leaned slightly forward, "it pretends to be something it's not. We've all met someone like that." The crowd chuckled. He nodded. We've all known someone who thought learning languages was enough, who mistook fluency for fearlessness. My fingers didn't flinch, neither did my breath, because I knew that line. I had lived in the shadow of that exact sentence, the moment he turned real work into a punchline. He scanned the audience eyes, grazing rows of heads. And then he saw me. Second row from the front. Upright, still. Interpreter badges pinned like quiet stars. His voice caught for just half a second. He recovered fast, but I'd seen the flicker. He continued his monologue, breezing past the anecdote that had once defined his podcast. He skipped the interpreter who cried. He edited himself. And in that edit, I saw his fear. Not of me personally, but of what I represented. Truth that couldn't be bent. Service that couldn't be measured by volume. I didn't need to stand. I didn't need to interrupt. The silence around me did the work. That's the thing about wearing your real record on your chest, those who know. One row behind me, a man in uniform leaned slightly forward. He wasn't clapping anymore, just watching. Then, somewhere in the back, a woman's voice. "Is that Sierra Fielding?" The name spread like a ripple. Someone gasped. One of the veterans in the second section stood up quietly and saluted out of respect, not rank. Tom noticed. His hands trembled slightly on the sides of the podium. He reached for his water, fumbled, dropped the cap, and the room, once loud, went still. The moderator stepped up afterward, thanking him for his service and insight. There was supposed to be a Q&A. There wasn't. He left the stage quickly, walking down the side aisle instead of through the center. But the center aisle led right past me, and as he tried to avoid my gaze, I stood. Not tall, not theatrical. Just steady. And as he passed, I said it softly. One word. In Arabic. He flinched, because he knew that word, from a past mission that had gone sideways until I decoded a fragment that saved his entire team. He had never credited me for that. But he remembered. That single word, shukran. Thank you. It sounded like forgiveness, but he knew it wasn't. Not here. Not now. It was a statement I was there. And you know it. Later in the reception hall, a few younger interpreters approached me, eyes wide, respectful. One asked, "Was that really you in Kabul with the clearance op?" I nodded once. She whispered, "I want to be you." I looked her in the eye. "You already are," I said. Then from behind me, a voice I hadn't heard in person in 4 years. "You never needed his permission." I turned, and there she was, Director Ellen Voss, CIA Chief of Strategic Linguistics, small, sharp, quiet like a shadow. But when she stepped into a room, even generals adjusted their posture. Her hair was shorter now, no makeup. But the badge on her belt wasn't ceremonial, it carried authority. She looked at me, then at the 4 interpreter pins on my jacket. "You're still carrying those?" she asked, tilting her head. I nodded. Didn't know if they still counted. She smiled faintly. "They count more now than ever." Then she raised her voice slightly, just enough for a nearby cluster of donors to hear. "This is Sierra Fielding," she said. "She's our asset." Heads turned. Even some reporters nearby took notice. Voss's voice dropped again. "He'll never laugh about you again." And with that, she left. No speech, no drama. Just enough. Tom tried to leave early, but too many people wanted to talk to me. His exit was slow, slower than his entrance. And as he passed the main doors, someone held it open for him. A junior officer in green fatigues, maybe 24 at most. She didn't salute him. She saluted me. Her hand snapped to her brow and held it there, eyes locked on mine. Then she whispered, "Ma'am, not Miss Fielding, just that one word. Ma'am." Tom froze mid-step. Didn't say a word. Didn't have to. It was over. It starts with footsteps. Not loud, not rushed, just deliberate leather against stone, crisp and steady coming from the corridor that leads into the east wing of the embassy. I don't turn. Not yet. Uncle Tom is still talking. "Look, all I'm saying is 4 interpreter badges." He chuckles to himself like it's a party joke. "I mean, come on." She sat behind a desk, probably Google translated half of it. My cousin Jenna laughs too hard, the kind of laugh that's begging for approval. Her red wine sloshes dangerously in its glass, but she doesn't care. I hear her whisper, "I mean, what even is an interpreter badge? It's the same song, just a different night." The difference is, I'm not shrinking this time. We're in the reception hall of the U.S. Embassy in Vienna. The vaulted ceilings make every sound linger, including their mockery. The chandeliers above cast soft gold light on military dress blues, diplomatic gowns, and polished shoes. Soft string music floats from the far end of the room, and yet their voices, Uncle Tom, Jenna, and the little orbit of my family that's always kept me in the shadows, cut through everything. Until the footsteps stop. Behind me. Something shifts. I feel it before I turn, like a thread pulled tight in the room. The hush spreads slowly like ripples on still water. I finally look over my shoulder. He's not flashy. No chest full of medals, no booming entrance, just calm, quiet precision. Tall, in a dark suit, no name badge, just a lapel pin deep blue with a single white star. But I know who he is. So does everyone else. It's Director Kavanaugh, He doesn't move toward the podium. He doesn't make a speech. He just stands hands behind his back and surveys the room. And then his eyes find mine. I nod once. His response is even smaller, the barest shift of his chin, just enough to acknowledge. I don't move, don't break the moment. But beside me, I feel my uncle go stiff. He recognizes him now. Is that? He starts. But Director Kavanaugh is already striding forward, not toward the officials or foreign dignitaries, toward me. Every diplomat, every attaché, every junior analyst watches him pass. Conversations pause, forks hang in midair. Even the musicians trail off, and Uncle Tom. He steps back, trying to blend into the crowd he just entertained. It doesn't work. The director stops right in front of me. He doesn't offer his hand. Instead, he speaks low, clear, and unmistakable. Ma'am, Asset Redleaf confirms full clearance under Protocol 7. Your presence is now authorized. The blood drains from my cousin Jenna's face. I hear glass touch down too hard on a tray, but I don't flinch. I just incline my head. Understood. He leans in slightly, not enough to invade, just enough to make sure only I hear the next words. You ready to brief Lynn? It's the first time in years someone's called me that here. The name I used in field circuits, the name they stripped from me at home. I let out the smallest breath, always. He nods once, then as quietly as he arrived, he pivots and walks away. And now, everyone looks at me. They look, but they don't say a word. Not Uncle Tom, not Jenna, not any of them. Because something just shifted. The silence isn't mocking anymore. It's reverent. And I say nothing because I don't need to. People didn't know what to do after that. Not the junior attachés, not the diplomats in velvet gowns, and certainly not my family. The string quartet had resumed Bach this time, but the notes floated in a kind of suspended tension, like even the air didn't know how to settle again. I walked away first, past Uncle Tom, who avoided my eyes, past Jenna, who looked like she might cry, whether from humiliation or confusion, I'll never know. I didn't care. I didn't rush. I didn't explain. I didn't gloat. I just walked with the calm precision I'd been trained for, heel-to-toe measured steps like a shadow you don't notice until it's already past you. The internal wing of the embassy was quieter hallways that didn't echo with gossip-only protocol. Behind a secured door, Director Kavanaugh waited with a folder. He didn't sit, neither did I. He handed me the folder. Intercepted chatter confirms your last translation was correct. I nodded once. The variant code in Tagalog, they used it in Davao 3 years ago. It's tied to Blue Hydra. His eyebrow twitched just a fraction. I knew it. No one else caught that. They weren't listening closely enough, I said, quieter than necessary. You can't just know a language. You have to live in it and listen when no one thinks you understand. He gave a half smile. That's why we trust you. Those 5 words shouldn't have meant so much. But after a decade of being dismissed at home, a lifetime of being the quiet one, the overachiever, the one who chose language over law school, it felt like being seen for the first time again. He glanced at his watch. Director Bloom from Langley is looping in. She wants a remote brief from you. Tonight. My heart didn't skip. My hands didn't shake, because I was ready, not just because I had trained. But because every moment they belittled me, every time Uncle Tom laughed, every time Jenna smirked, every time someone called my work just translation, I had absorbed it like a wall takes paint, layer over layer, quietly, until now. Now it served me. Back in the reception hall they were whispering. I heard it before I even stepped through the double doors. She called her ma'am. Asset designation. Wait, was that the CIA director? My name wasn't trending. But their eyes followed. I wasn't the same niece anymore, not the awkward girl with the obscure job. Now, I was the woman the director walked up to, the woman who didn't flinch. I crossed the room again, but this time no one blocked my way. No one stopped me to interrupt. And when I reached Uncle Tom, I let the silence hang between us. He finally cleared his throat. Look, Lynn, I didn't mean anything by the jokes. You know how I am. I tilted my head. Yes. I do. He waited for a smile. An olive branch. I didn't give him one. I've got to debrief, I said, calm, cold. They're waiting. His face fell just slightly. You always were serious. No, I replied, stepping past him. I just stopped laughing when the room thought I didn't understand. I left him there. He wasn't angry. He was small. For the first time, he was the one unsure of what to say. And I didn't need to say anything at all. That night, I debriefed 2 regional directors, 1 CIA tech advisor, and a joint intel liaison from EUCOM. None of them questioned my qualifications. None of them asked what 4 interpreter badges really meant. They listened, and when I finished precise, concise, clear, the screen went dark. But the weight remained, a quiet kind of gravity. Later, in my small room on the top floor of the embassy guest quarters, I stood by the window. Below, Vienna twinkled like a painting, old stone lit by modern street lamps, courtyards whispering history. Behind me, my old badge cases lay on the desk. Interpreter badge Korean, interpreter badge Arabic, interpreter badge Farsi, interpreter badge Tagalog. I used to keep them in a drawer. Now I didn't need to hide them. I didn't need to explain. Not anymore. I wasn't just a language nerd, not just the odd girl in a family of engineers and lawyers. I was the one they turned to when it mattered most. The one who walked alone, quiet, steady, overlooked and turned silence into power. The asset. I flew home alone 2 weeks later. No motorcade, no briefings, no fanfare. Just me, a carry-on, and a memory that still echoed Director Kavanaugh saying, "We trust you," and Director Bloom nodding at the end of the call like she was seeing me for the first time even through the static. It should have felt like a victory. And it was. But not the kind that made headlines. This one lived quiet, steady, inside. Like fluency you don't need to announce. Like power you don't have to prove anymore. The house looked smaller than I remembered. I parked across the street. It was dusk, and the porch light flickered like it always had one of those little things Dad always meant to fix and never did. Uncle Tom's truck wasn't there, neither was Jenna's car. Just Mom's little hybrid in the driveway. Good. I wasn't ready for noise. Mom opened the door before I could knock. She must have seen me through the window. Her eyes searched my face, not for answers, but for cues. Had I come to argue, to explain, to gloat? I gave her none of it. "Hey, Mom," I said gently. She opened the door wider. "Come in, honey." The house smelled the same. Lemon floor polish and old books. A lifetime of things held on to too long. I sat at the kitchen table while she poured tea the same way she always had when I came home from college. Like she didn't know how to say she was proud, so she used sugar cubes and ceramic cups instead. She sat down, folded her hands. "They've been talking," she said finally. "Tom, Jenna, everyone who was at the reception." I said nothing. I didn't know she added voice barely above a whisper. "About what you do, who you really are." I met her eyes. "You didn't ask." She flinched, not like a slap, more like a memory she hadn't meant to recall. "No," she said slowly. "I didn't." Silence settled again, but it wasn't angry. It wasn't sharp, just honest. After a moment, she reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. I should have listened more. I didn't answer right away, because part of me, some old ache, still wanted to say, "too late." But something deeper whispered, "You didn't need them to listen. You listened to yourself." So I just nodded. "Thank you," I said quietly. That night, I walked through my old bedroom. Same bookshelf, same faded poster of the constellations, same crack in the ceiling paint, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. I was a visitor now. And strangely, that felt right. I wasn't the girl who used to cry herself to sleep after family dinners where Uncle Tom made me the punchline. I wasn't the teenager who once buried her interpreter certification under a stack of college textbooks because it wasn't a real job. I was the woman who briefed 2 intelligence directors and caught a phrase that could have cost lives. The woman who didn't need to be loud. Just right. In the morning, I packed again. Before I left, I put something on the kitchen counter. 4 badge cases. Farsi, Korean, Arabic, Tagalog, lined up side by side, gleaming under the sunlight through the window, not as trophies, not to prove anything, but to remind them that the quietest person at the table had been carrying meaning all along. I didn't leave a note, didn't need to. I walked out with the same steady step I had that night in Vienna. No explosion, no confrontation, just quiet power in full view now. At the airport, I got a message on Signal. Encrypted, of course. A simple line from Director Kavanaugh Hydra confirmed. Debrief when ready. I typed back, already translating. We'll brief tomorrow. Then I boarded. Middle seat, no uniform, no announcement, just a woman fluent in 5 languages, and finally fluent in her own voice. They used to call me quiet. Now they listen, and they don't even know why they stand straighter when I enter a room. But I do, because I didn't need to raise my voice to take back the space I'd always earned. I just waited for the moment silence spoke loudest, and then I let it speak for me.